is your championship recap, and I am not stepping up to the fucking mic until we start this off correctly.
The champ is here! 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 The champ is here!
Drop a bomb on him. And another, and another, and another, and another. God damn it, drop another bomb on him. Three bombs for 3 championships. Drop 3 bombs on him. Okay, let's begin. In 11 seasons that we've played fantasy, something happened yesterday that's never happened before. The number 1 seed has made the championship 4 times, and all resulting collectively of a record of 1-3. Just yesterday, the very first number 1 seed won its title. And that number 1 seed is Bundy. That's right. Bundy. $81-75. That's the final score I want you guys to think about. Before Jay gets caught up in Todd Gurley's 38-point performance, if we just deduct 38 points from 119, that leaves me with 81 points. So that means drop a bomb on him. In case you're not getting it, drop another one on him. What that means is if Todd Gurley would have pulled his hamstring before the game or practicing, and I would have left him there right before the game started and he had a fat goose egg, you would have still fucking lost. So don't come to me with, you should put Todd Gurley on that belt, commish. No. Todd Gurley scored 79 points this week and last week. Yes, he is my MVP. And yes, I did need him to defeat Ed. I think had you taken out Todd Gurley's points against Ed, I think I would have lost by maybe 5 to 6 points. He is my MVP, but this would not have been possible without the support of none other than drop a bomb on it. None other than C.J. Anderson, who in rounds 2 and 3 got 15 points week 15 and 20 points just this weekend. And that was 158 yards last week too, and 88 yards this week. So it wasn't just Gurley. No. It was a team effort. And in fantasy, sometimes team means 2 to 3 people. Drop a fucking bomb on them. I got to give it to Jay. Because I've told you guys about our history. I've told you 2012, for example, I defeated Jay 98-63 in the chip. Jay came right back in 2013 and beat me 106-99. And then that very next year in round 1, 2014, he bounced me right out of the playoffs 80-49. I then returned the favor the very next year in the semis, 113-81. And of course, later that year, the next week, I lost to Ed as the number 1 seed. So for the past 3 seasons, I've made the finals 2 times with a record of 1-1. But that's besides the point. That's just to illustrate the fact that I've always been here, with exception to last year when I didn't make the playoffs. Drop a bomb on me. I mention those years because Jay and I have eliminated each other these past 4 or 5 seasons. So I respect Jay. I noticed that Jay hasn't written anything in the chat stating that he's officially lost, just speculating hours before it actually happened. So I know it pains Jay to lose to me. And I don't blame him, because I would fucking hate losing to him too. But it's a good thing that I didn't drop a bomb on him. I call myself Bundy because, as you guys may remember, last season when I said the winner of 2016 can name my team moving forward, and if I don't win the championship, I cannot change it. I was ready, willing, and able to wear the Peggy name for 10 years if I had to drop a bomb on him. But guess what happened? The very next season, I was vindicated. And now, we are back to Team Bundy. Oh yes, I got my coach back. I got my name back. I got my dignity back. Paul, you weren't able to hold me down. I'll get back to slandering you guys. But I actually want to give you something constructive here, as I always do for the championship recaps. And I want to name a list of players who, for whatever reason, whether they did good this year or not so good this year, I'm wondering where they will place in next year's draft. Just a small list of players. Starting with Dez Bryant, who was Orlando's second pick this year. He finished at 23rd amongst all wide receivers. What's going to happen with Dex? Did I say Dez? Or it doesn't matter. Drop a fucking bomb! The champ doesn't have to correct himself. So if I said Dex or whatever the fuck I said, it does not matter. Okay. What's going to happen with Dez next season? Is he going to be a Cowboy? Some people think that he may not be. Maybe it's time to change scenery. That's a possibility. The next player is Julio Jones, who we all pretty much felt like he didn't perform quite like he was supposed to. But he finished 5th amongst all wide receivers. He was Pedro's number 1 pick. I personally don't feel that if Matt Ryan's going to be his quarterback next season, I don't think Julio Jones is going to be anybody's first pick. 2nd, 3rd, definitely because he's Julio Jones. But if he's still playing with Matt Ryan, I don't think that's going to happen. Or at least I wouldn't draft him first. DeMarco Murray is the next player on my list. He finished 22nd amongst running backs. He was Ed's 2nd pick. I seriously doubt he is going to be drafted that high next season. I'm expecting DeMarco Murray to be drafted somewhere between the 4th or 6th round. Juju Smith-Schuster has, he's built his way up from Pittsburgh, of course, as you guys know. He's built his way up, to being, I think, a respectable wide receiver too. Sort of something similar to, like how Alshon Jeffrey sort of built his way in over the past few years. I feel like he's going to have that sort of production moving forward. I'd be very interested to see where he where he drafts, because I'm pretty sure he will be drafted. LaShawn McCoy, who had a better season for Paul than most of us might even realize. Paul actually had 2 very good running backs, which makes Paul's season even that much more laughable. Drop a fucking bomb on Paul. I feel for you, Paul, but it's okay. He actually had 2 good performances from running backs this season. LaShawn McCoy, who finished in 7th, and Mark Ingram finished 5th. Even more interesting for Mark Ingram was the fact that he shared all that with Kamara, who's another player who he's going to go very high next season. And that's pretty much going to be the power struggle next season, trying to figure out who the fuck should you draft first. Should you draft Kamara or Mark Ingram? He's probably going to win the Rookie of the Year too. David Johnson is perhaps the biggest enigma within this list because he was Joe's first pick and he got hurt the very first week. What happens to his value? I mean, Arizona didn't exactly look great this season. Obviously, that's because, Johnson wasn't in the mix. But what happens to his draft value? Is he still going to be drafted in the first round? I would say, and I would predict he will be, but I see him going definitely not first. I see him maybe going 7th, 8th, 9th. Maybe he drops down to 10th or 11th. Drop a fucking bomb. And another. I apologize, guys. I'm looking down on you right now since my nose is leaking. Okay. This next list that I have is just a very short list of players who I would be very disappointed if you guys drafted them next year. I do not believe that these players should be drafted. It would not surprise me if you guys drafted them. And these are all 4 quarterbacks. Jameis Winston, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, and Eli Manning. I do not believe that these players should be drafted. For whatever reason, you guys continue to draft second quarterbacks. In my opinion, it always feels like trying not to lose as opposed to trying to win, because you've drafted someone and minutes later you draft their quote unquote backup just in case they get hurt. But all the while, what you're really doing is devaluing your team, because imagine if 2 to 3 players on your team perform very, 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 very great. And if that player just so happens to get hurt, that number 1 quarterback, you can trade him and get a better quarterback rather than just sticking with Phillip Rivers the rest of the way. You can actually trade for a better quality quarterback. So, and also people like Jared Goff, for example, are much more higher value than I think any of these quarterbacks are better offensive systems than any of these quarterbacks, fantasy-wise at least. So I would put him ahead of everyone. I mean, I'm always against having 2 quarterbacks, and I'm even more against drafting 2 quarterbacks. So those are 4 players that I really would not like to see drafted next season. But I said I was going to get back to the matter at hand. That's 3. Count them, 3 championships. And what's the breakdown here? How did Jay lose this game? As I told Jay, he was definitely overthinking the quarterback position. He put in Nick Foles for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it was a Monday thing. That would be that's my best guess. And here you have Phillip Rivers, who put up 15 points. Nick Foles puts up 8. Now, that wouldn't have made any difference. That wouldn't have given Jay the victory. But that just proves my point that Jay had to have known what his team was going into the finals. And his team wasn't a quarterback-driven team. Quarterback-driven teams this year were Ed with Cam Newton. You had Orlando with Russell Wilson, especially because he had the attachment of Jimmy Graham. You also had Joe, who had Tom Brady, and he had Gronk. That's the identity of those teams. The identity of your team was Le'Veon Bell. The identity of your team was DeAndre Hopkins. I can understand taking out your quarterback and putting somebody else in if you didn't have a great matchup, but I mean, Phillip Rivers was going up against the Jets. That's not exactly a terrifying matchup. And the answer to that is Nick Foles. For what reason? You see, all this shit it's just cosmetic. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sort of a difference, and it didn't make any difference. Like I told you before, your Saturday matchup was a joke. You had a decent game from DeAndre Hopkins. Zeke, Dallas has their issues, so they went away from Zeke. And that's pretty much all your team could do. You see, I decided to play Dan Bailey for this reason. And maybe you might want to listen to this, because this is why my team was able to score as many points as they did. And I understand that your team scored more during the season. I feel like I haven't dropped a bomb in a while. Like, why am I speaking to you instead of speaking down to you? Drop. Okay. Now that I am back to championship form, let me speak down to you, Jay. I choose Legatron because of Todd Gurley. Legatron would basically be following Todd Gurley the entire season. And it turned out right. It turned out that Legatron was the number 1 ranked kicker. And that's mainly because Todd Gurley's always able to drive the ball into kicking, into kickable plays, whether he scores or not. I mean, yes, there might be a week where Legatron gets 4 points, but that probably means that Todd Gurley got 2 to 3 touchdowns. And this week, what I decided to do was to take Dan Bailey. Why did I take Dan Bailey? Well, that's because if Dan Bailey would have gotten a 4 or a 5, I don't think it would have made me lose this week. I simply wanted Dan Bailey to follow Ezekiel Elliott. If Ezekiel Elliott gets 2 touchdowns, then that automatically means that I downgrade your touchdowns by 2 points because of the extra points. That's my logic. Doesn't have to be your logic, but it's mine. So what happens? Dan Bailey gets 14 points. Ezekiel Elliott gets 11. If he drives the ball down and Dallas isn't able to score, that means Dan Bailey gets more opportunities. And oh, by the way, the kicker that you decided to pick up, the backup for Legatron, Sam Ficken, got 2 points, while Dan Bailey got 14. So there you have it. That concludes the trilogy of Jay and I in the finals. Me taking the third and leaving him with a record of 1 win and 2 losses. And I'd just like to say that I know I've stirred up a lot of bullshit because I come on the recaps and I say a lot. I also try to inform you guys. I try to entertain you guys. I try to make you cope with your horrible draft picks, with your terrible choices every single week. Maybe you can look forward to the recap. Maybe that's something that makes you feel good. And I know I haven't spoken very, well of any of you. I've spoken down to you. I've talked down to you. I'm talking down to you right now. But nonetheless, I would like to say that I sincerely apologize to none of you. Fuck all of you. Give me my goddamn belt. But as I said, I do respect Jay. I respect Jay because next season, he'll be back. In the same way that Common's character in John Wick will always be on Keanu Reeves' ass. He will be back and he will try to murder me. But what I did this year, Jay, is I just simply drove that knife right into your chest And as a professional courtesy, I let you know that if you take that knife out of your chest, you will die immediately. So get yourself to a hospital. As a professional courtesy, of course, because I know you will be back. So, for Jay, and not for the rest of you, I will play this next and last clip just to let him know to keep his hopes up for next season and to not feel so bad when I am crowned officially fantasy champion when I get my belt Super Bowl Sunday. This one's for you, Jay. And before I sign off, I always want to let you guys know that I hope your quarterbacks get hurt before they leave the locker room. I hope your running backs pull all their goddamn hamstrings. And I fucking wish that your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Thank you for listening. Go fuck yourselves.
You know, this whole thing is about people being scared.
Aren't you afraid of him?
Afraid? Shit, no. He's a fighter, I'm a fighter. If I'm better on that day, I win. That's just the way it goes. Someday, every fighter loses. Sooner or later, somebody comes along and they got your ticket. Too old. Just wasn't your day, whatever the reason is. In the end, everybody gets beaten. Most you can hope for is that you stay on top a while. Be the best.